All right, welcome to today's Magnify the Middle episode. Today we'll be talking about leadership. What is leadership? How is it different from management? And what does it take to be a great leader? To help Elizabeth and I answer these heavy questions is Tom Watson. Tom, welcome. Could you give us kind of a brief overview of your role and the type of team that you currently lead?
Sure. Thanks for having me. I'm Tom Watson. I'm the director of IT at Wiley Companies. I lead a team of 8 individuals currently with the potential of leading more teams in the future. And I'm just that. I'm the director of IT. So we direct everything from the help desk operations to infrastructure management and system management at Wiley Companies, which is a small to medium sized chemical manufacturer.
Awesome. So I want to just take a moment to kind of introduce and let everyone know kind of how I met you, because I think it's interesting. So you and I both belong to a networking group, and we were going to a conference, and me being the stalker that I am, I go on LinkedIn and I look at all the attendees and I try to make connections. And I came across your profile and it said your title was Level 76 Tankadin Raid Leader LFG. And so this was absolutely hilarious to me. And what I thought was even funnier was not only was that your title, but most of your team had similar titles. Like somebody else had Level 78 Technomancer LFG, which I thought was interesting because obviously they're higher level than you, but you're still their boss. And then I decided either these guys are committing career suicide or this is the most awesome team I've ever come across. I'm really not sure which, but once I met you guys, I decided on the latter for sure. And so, what struck me even further upon meeting you guys is that you were dead serious about technology and improving the world. So I'm just curious, how did you foster this sense of fun, but at the same time, absolute seriousness about making an awesome experience for your organization?
Right out the gate, heavy questions. So let's jump right into it. So one of the things I feel is super important is to allow everyone to express themselves exactly the way they do. And in doing so, you foster real human connections with the people that are on your team. I have people who love information technology, but they're humans too. So what do they also love to do? Most IT people, not all, but most are nerds and they're geeks and they play video games and they play board games. And so we drew on that. And both me and the systems engineer were chuckling when we came up with these titles because it's just tired of seeing the same titles on LinkedIn all the time. Let's just go with something else. Let's go with a different approach to it. And that's how I do most of the things on the team. So they're allowed to, we'll dive into all kinds of different topics, I'm certain, but I can't make all the decisions. My job's to help guide with borders, right? And allow my team to make decisions inside of that. So I have to foster them to be people that can make their own decisions. They shouldn't have to come to me. And when we came up with this little idea, it was just normal. I mean, we have plants in the office that have D&D sheets to them. They have stats and the whole nine yards.
That's Dungeons and Dragons for those that don't know. So
Yes.
D&D is short for Dungeons and Dragons.
Thanks, Jeff.
For Elizabeth.
So anything you can do to take the monotony of the day and make it more personable to the humans that exist there. Sure, we're at work, but we're all humans at the core.
Yeah, I love that. Just the idea that sometimes I think people forget that they're not automatons, they're not robots, they're actual human beings, and work is just a part of life, right? It's not completely separate.
Yeah, that's a really creative approach to just having an environment where it doesn't sound like you have a sense of trying to maintain control over your employees and really dictating what they do, but you've got that security and letting go of that to let them really, be their own selves and be creative.
Yeah. So, I mean, if we want to go completely off the rails for a second, we have a tendency to promote people that are the best at what they do, not necessarily the best leaders, right? And when you do that, you end up with a manager that is really good at the task they could do, but not necessarily good at telling others to do the task. And when you do that, that's how you create micromanagers. Well, you're not doing it my way, so I'm going to tell you exactly how to do it every step of the way. For better or worse, when I took over in the IT department that I'm currently in, I was the network admin beforehand and the security admin. So when it came to things like systems and help desk and all of that, that's not my background. Like, sure, I understand how Active Directory works, but if you want me to stand up an Office 365 environment, that's not what I come from. I come from the network and security side. So I had to learn really quickly to trust the people that know those roles and allow them to do their jobs. And instead, from a leadership perspective, set boundaries on my goals and strategies, and then just monitor the chatter. And if we start to wander outside those boundaries, then I stand up and guide people back into it. But it's not required to make the day-to-day go. I didn't hire people that don't know what they're doing. I hired people because we interviewed and I knew exactly what they did. So why would I ever think that I should tell them how to do their jobs? Just let them do their jobs. Let them answer their own questions, empower them to be what they're supposed to be, and the team will just run itself. Like, it needs course corrected occasionally, but we're not, I can't control every action. And it always amazes me when I run into like a manager or a leader that thinks they need to control every single piece of the puzzle. And they're so stressed and they're so overwhelmed. And it's like, you're making this hard on yourself. Like, those people know what to do. Let them do their jobs.
Yeah, we talk about that concept of like just not just delegating, but actually delegating authority, the authority behind it. And like you said, having the guardrails, having the big picture objective, but then letting them do their job, hiring good people, get out of the way. Yeah.
So I don't know if you saw this or not, but one of the books I like and I've read in the past was Call Sign Chaos, which is by General Mattis. And it's about his leadership strategy. And one of the things he tried to do is he understood he couldn't control the entire battlefield in war, right? So the easiest way to do that is to empower his commanders on the ground to be able to make decisions inside of his grand strategy. And in doing so, he actually got inside what they call the order loop of enemy forces. That's why he has the call sign of chaos, because when you attack an enemy force and things have changed, they pass that up through all the different channels to then get new orders and come back down. But his teams weren't doing that. They were making orders on the ground. So even if the other command shifted strategy, he was already outside of the strategy they had shifted to. And that made chaos on the battlefield. And he realized at an early level that you can empower your people to make decisions. And then you just have to make sure, well, he called it monitoring the radio chatter. And I kind of do the same thing, monitoring emails and tickets that all the initial boundaries that we're staying inside of. And then, just make sure every single day that you have done, he has the mantra, what do I know? Who needs to know it? And have I told them yet? Well, that's all you need to do with your very direct report-ins, to make sure that they have the information to make those decisions that need to be made during the day. And, that little teeny tiny change, I probably applied that after I read that book, 5 years ago? That made a huge difference. Like, the team sped up in a way that I would have never expected. We actually did a brand change from our original name of Organic Technologies, the Wiley Companies. We did that from an IT perspective. That's a massive change. That's not just a, change the emails and move forward. That's a whole domain swap. It's like being bought out. Yeah. And we did that internally without any external support. And we did it because I allowed my team to make decisions on the fly. I mean, we did it in a very short amount of time and for very reduced cost. And it really all contributes right back to that exact idea.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, less stress for the leader. The employees more engaged because they're empowered, and you can move faster because you don't have all of this communication overhead.
Correct.
Yeah. Interesting.
And Tom, I think that's really common in businesses where you promote to middle management the person who is really good at doing their job when they're in that position. Do you find when you get a manager who's that micromanager, like you described, trying to make sure everyone's doing it the same way they were doing it, do you find them to be coachable, or are there ways to coach them into more of that secure leadership role where they're able to just give them the boundaries and let them run with it their way?
I think it comes down to how they were taught. A lot of people learn their styles of leadership based on who they have been led by in the past. So they know what they like and they know what they don't like. That doesn't mean they know how to apply those things. And I found that there's, at least, my grand scheme of the world, right? There's two types of leaders. There's ones that are kind of natural leaders, and you just have to teach them how to lead a group. And then there are people who want to lead, but they're not natural leaders. And in those ones, you really have to sit down and go through the basics. Like, they just may not understand. They may not understand the whole principle of a goodwill bucket. You can't be negative to an employee all the time. For every 10 good things you say, you can say one negative thing. So, and if you don't play that strategy right, you'll create an environment where they don't think they can do anything right. So, but natural born leaders kind of accidentally know that for some reason, and it's odd. So you have those two veins. So you can coach them depending on what they are, but again, I it's so crazy to me. I'll walk into a department that's like restructuring, and I'll ask this question because I think it's fun to ask. If the current leader isn't there, and you're all standing around in a room, and something goes wrong, who would you look for to give the answer? And a lot of times the whole team will name one or two people that are the same names across the board. And it's not the ones being looked at for the management position. They're usually off to the side. They're not the ones that the company's thinking about. And it's like that little exercise really shows that that's the person that you can put into this position and start training to be the leader that you need them to be. Every company leads in a different way, but ultimately, at the end of the day, it's all human-based relationships. And the people who are good at dealing with humans are usually the best to lead them in any aspect.
I think that is a pretty profound insight, and often not utilized. Just simply like, who is the go-to? Like you said, when no one else is around or someone has a problem, who are they just naturally going to? Very interesting.
It is like I said, there's some super interesting things I discovered when I moved into management. Like, and I'll just bring it up as an example. One of the things I was asked one time, and it was about remote work, and the other manager was like, you allow remote work? And I was like, and this was pre-COVID, and I was like, yeah, I trust my employees to do what they're supposed to do, and we rotate through as much as possible. I believe that remote work gives a focused time, and I think it's really, really important to give somebody a time where they're not going to be interrupted to work on things that require that focus. And they were like, well, I do that too, but they have to earn my trust before they can work remotely. And that blew my mind. Why would you have an employee that you don't trust? To me, you earn distrust. You don't earn trust. I give you that up front. You haven't done anything to wrong me. Why would I ever think that you're just going to be mischievous like at home? No, I'm going to trust you until you prove that you're like untrustworthy for some reason. So inherently mistrusting your employees, well, then to me, that just like started to like rack through my mind. Then so you're telling me that you don't trust your employees. So does that mean in meetings that they can feel that? It's a human interaction. You know when somebody doesn't trust you. So if you are the leader and you're ultimately, so are you pushing your employees away? Are you actually making them work less? Do they resent you and therefore just do the very base minimum to not make you mad? The ramifications of it are so huge, but people just, it's simple. It really, it's crazy.
Dude, that is actually pretty deep. If you think about when it comes from either like policies, like how we write policies, how we approach people. Yeah. Do you start from a premise of distrust, or do you start from a premise of trust? And I think you're right. I think if you look at a lot of corporate policies, they actually center around distrust first.
Correct. And I found this too, like, so if an inter-company employee transfer happens, you'll have a lot of managers or supervisors or even higher ups come to you and tell you all the things that you need to watch out for that employee. Hey, we've had problems about this in the past. And I look right at them and say, I don't care. They're clean slated for me. I don't care about the past problems. I'll figure out what the problems are as we move forward. To me, they're a brand new employee and I hired them for a reason. They could do the job and I trusted them to do it. So I don't care about the past performance issues you may have seen, because as far as I'm concerned, they're most likely caused by management, not by the employee.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. Man, we could go down that topic for a whole separate podcast. There's a guy I follow. He's his name is Jeffrey Karenzik. He's a chief strategist for a large bank, and he's really big into what's called second chance hiring. And this is people that have had felons, previous records that he goes in hiring. And so he would apply your concept as well, which I think is interesting. All right. So I want to switch gears for just a sec. Next question up is often we think about leaders as about others, how we interact with others, what we want others to do. But you did a post on social media recently where you said, really, you need to start with yourself, which I think is interesting because as leaders, we're always thinking about others. And this is what you said. You said, before you can stand in front of others and guide them with your mentorship, you must look in the mirror and have an internal discussion about these traits. Then, and this is really important, you must continue to learn and invest in these traits for the rest of your time you have people in your charge. Lastly, if you do this well enough, the people who saw you strive for each of these traits will help you when you slip in the future, alienate them and deny these qualities in your pursuits, and your employees will abandon you. So you had like 10 traits listed. Do you maybe want to just talk about like maybe like your top 1 or 3 traits kind of like out of that list that you find helpful or that you're currently working on, like traits that you're currently working on?
So I'm always working on all of them because none of us are perfect, right?
Okay.
So you can, a lot of times, if you do something right as a leader, your employees or your team or whatever, they'll come up to you and be like, "You're really good at this. You know what you're doing." The moment you think, "Yeah, I am. You're right," you're losing. Because to me, it's always a work. Like it's so hard. You're the what they strive to be like. And you are the leader for your team. You pass on all successes to your team and you take all failures 100% to yourself. So, because ultimately at the end of the day, it's your team. So the failures are on you, not on the people underneath of you. So there's this, again, I see that a lot too. Leaders will accept all the accomplishments and pass on all the failures to their team. And it's not that way. It's the other way around. So the list, it has to have a lot of things on it, but there's some important things on here. I think ultimately, honesty and integrity. Some people love it, some people hate it. I am unbelievably candid, maybe when I shouldn't be sometimes. But if I'm gonna tell you straight up right away if there's an issue and if there's not, and it comes down to like if and I'll use an employee messing up as an example. I'm going to pull you aside. I'm going to have a conversation about it real quick. It's going to be a one-shot done. I'm going to let you know what you did wrong. We're going to move on. It's over. But I'm going to be honest about it. I'm going to have that honesty and integrity about what you did, but also about what I did. When I screw up, I'm going to stand right in front of the team and say, I did that wrong. That was a mistake. That is not how we should have done that. And I apologize immediately for how I did that. That's super important because that is how you, again, human relationship. Your best friend doesn't have honesty and integrity. They're not your best friend anymore. So as a leader, you're trying to keep a group of people together, that same boat, right? You need to have that. A good communicator goes along with empathy. You need to empathize with your people and you need to communicate with them. I thought it was really odd. Not odd. In the Army, we did counseling sessions and one-on-ones. So I met with my sergeants quite frequently and we talked. And I found that so important that I carried it over to the civilian workforce. And then other leaders eventually listened to the idea. Some do it, some don't. But if you have an employee and they're single and they live in an apartment and they have a cat and their cat dies and you don't know that, you'll have no idea why their employment slumped for the week. Like, you just think they're doing something bad or not caring this week, but there's more to it. But if you meet with your employees, you have good communication, you have empathy for what they're going through, then you will understand them as a human. And therefore, on the flip side, when you have a bad day, when your week goes bad, they will step up and make sure that you are covered on, which is that's how you turn a leader, or not a leader, a manager and a bunch of employees into a team. That's when it becomes a team, is when there starts to become, I don't want, and this is going to sound cliche, right? I don't want a bunch of loyal employees. I want a bunch of employees that love each other, like friends would. Like, I want them to cover down. I want them to want to move their furniture. I want them to want to come out and help when they need a helping hand, because that's the type of team that comes together in any crisis mode and is amazing.
Don't you think too, the more that you show that you care about your employees, the more engaged they are in their work and the more engaged they are in their team and in their company, and it really just comes around as a reward, just like around and around.
Yeah, and it's so interesting. It not only does it help the team, and the team wants to help the company. But even if the company starts to go off the rails for some reason, and the team would normally start to like, well, it's all over, they'll still unite at least around the team. Like, okay, well, we can't help everybody, but let's help who we can. And that, like, it just fosters like I said, a team, you know, and you want that team to work together. And I don't know, it's odd to me when I look at some teams at other places or even at my own employment, and you see that they're working, but they're not really working together. They're each just doing what they need to do and then going home. And that's fine to some degree, but man, it could be so much stronger if you just gave them a little bit more attention and listened a little bit more and let them do what they know how to do a little bit easier.
Yeah. I'm kind of going back to your honesty and integrity too. We have, every company has their core values. One of ours is telling the truth. So we have this phrase is like, try to tell the truth even when it hurts, or even not even when it hurts, even when it's hard. And I try to carry that over with vendors too. And I've gotten some odd reactions from people sometimes, like kind of like you said with candor. It's like when you just tell them like, you know what, this isn't really a fit. And they're like, well, when can we schedule the next demo? I'm like, we're not. Like, it's not a fit, bro. I'm sorry. And they're so used to playing the game, right? Of just like schedule a meeting and then somebody cancel. And so whether it's employees or even vendors too, especially I think in roles like ours where, your vendors are often an extension of your team. All right. Next category, and you've touched on it a little bit, Tom, a lot of your experience comes from the military, and I didn't have that experience. Elizabeth didn't have that experience. I mean, how has that shaped your view of leadership, and how would you kind of explain that to somebody that's a civilian or never had that experience?
So first off, the military taught me a lot of great things. They had a lot of different pieces. I'll use an example. So when you're on the way to leadership, or you are already a leader, a lot of times you got to like a leadership. I don't want to call it a confidence course because that's wrong, because I'm dumping on what it's actually called, but it's basically like a leadership course. There's a bunch of problems that have to be solved. Like, we have to get a squad from point A to point B. We have 2 planks, don't touch the water. You got to get across this like pool. And then you rotate who's in charge, and then you solve the problem and move across the area. And you start to build this like understanding that you're not the one. You may be the leader, but you don't have all the answers. And you need to listen to your team to get those answers to move forward. Those type of little interactions really carried over. I mean, plus you lead from the front. There was nothing that my soldiers did that I didn't do. If they're pushing a broom in a motor pool, then I'm pushing a broom in a motor pool with them. And when I moved to the civilian world, I noticed a little bit of difference in that. I'll use an example. So in the military during Thanksgiving, in the dining facilities, we call them DFACs, you go in there and you get your Thanksgiving meal. On Thanksgiving Day, all the generals, all the colonels are on the serving line serving all the privates their food, because the privates eat first, the generals eat last. And
I got chills. I literally just got chills just hearing that story.
So when I come to the corporate world, and I see an example like at another company where they have a competition for, like, they bring in their cars and show them off. And of course, the people with the highest money have the best cars. Why are they in this competition? Why are they any part of it? This is why are all the workers cooking food at a company sponsored barbecue, and all the C-suite is eating that food? Why is that's reversed to me? Because leaders lead from the front. You should be. There's a book called On the House by John Boehner, and he talks about how one of his lines from that book is, a leader without followers is just a guy walking down the street. So you have to support your team. You have to lead them, but they have to want to be with you. And you have to show that you're willing to roll up your sleeves and do the same thing that they're going to do. And the military taught me that. And in corporate world, I see a lot of do what I say, not as I do. And that breaks me. Like, I'm not good at that. My moral fiber falls apart, and my candid comes out, and I get asked to leave meeting rooms. So
I love that my candid comes out. I'm going to use that one. That's clutch.
Me too.
My candid comes out.
Well, Tom, first of all, thank you for serving. And I want to go back to what you're talking about with what the military taught you about leadership. And I think there's a common thought that military leadership is very authoritative leadership style, but what you're describing is very servant-hearted leadership. And I imagine the military is very intentional about that. Why do you think being more servant-hearted is important and when leading a team, whether it's military or civilian?
So I will caveat that, right? So it is very servant, but that's because, but at the break point in a crisis mode, the leader has to be able to make those decisions, and the team has to be able to follow them. I think it's important to lead in a servant leadership style because you gain the trust of the people that work with you, the people that are in your charge, so that when, it hits the fan, when you start making the calls, they move. And that, but if you don't have that relationship, if you haven't built an actual relationship with the team through servant leadership, when you say take that hill, they're going to question it because they don't understand and they don't feel that you have their best interest in mind. So by building the servant leadership side, you can really, put those in crisis mode. When you speak, actions happen. And I think they go together. If you just do authoritative the entire time, and again, the military's hierarchy, it's structured, you're right to a degree. You can't, part of the military I didn't like is if you didn't like a leader, you really couldn't tell them that you didn't like them. That piece didn't exist. Well, you could, but I got in trouble a lot. Anyways,
Your candor came out.
Yeah, I definitely got my hand slapped a lot in the military because I when I saw a leader that wasn't acting up to those values that we had, I was going to call him on it, for better or worse. But I think that really comes down to to answer your question, that servant leadership allows that more direct leadership to work way more smoothly than if you're direct all the time and always ordering all the time. Then that order doesn't have nearly the effect it does in the scenario when needed.
Yeah, because it's more just positional authority. You do what I say because I'm your boss and that's my title and that's your title. And, without that level of trust, it just doesn't get you very far.
In my experience, when a new person's promoted, civilian, military, almost the same, they're almost one of two types. The first time that they're promoted to over top of people, they either come in like a hammer, they're way too hard, they shatter everything apart, or they come in way too soft and they get eaten alive. Normally, this auto corrects over a certain period of time. They get hemmed up in a review. An employee says some things about how their leadership style is that they didn't track. So they correct back towards that middle ground, or their team starts reporting them to like human resources about how horrible this boss is, and it corrects back towards the middle. So for the most part, they usually course corrects, but in the beginning, it's like one side or the other. And you should learn, hopefully you'd learned beforehand. You have a mentor, somebody who guides you into leadership, but let's be real. We are not really good at that. We promote people and then we kind of let them flounder around and we hope that they figure it out because, well, I promoted you, so you should know how to do this. The Army does a really good job of when you get promoted, you go to courses to learn. There's a warrior leaders course, there's a senior leaders course. And each time you get promoted, I was enlisted, so the officers do a lot more, but each time you're promoted, you go to another course to learn another level of leadership. We don't do that very well in the corporate world. We promote somebody and we just kind of expect them to figure it out. Yeah. There's a lot of military that I do carry over. Like I'll point it out as another huge thing, left seat, right seat. So if somebody is transitioning, you bring in the person that's going to replace them and you let them monitor how they do their job. And then you switch the role and let the other person do it with the previous person monitoring how that role works. And then you separate the roles back out. We don't really do that a lot in the corporate world, but if you can do it, it makes the transition so much smoother as you're promoting a help desk to an admin or an admin to an engineer. Allowing that transition time between really helps smooth out the entire thing.
Yeah. And you also mentioned one of the things that you carried over was, I believe you referred to it as individual counseling sessions, like one-on-one meetings with your employees. What does that mean? Like, is that just leaving space for the getting to know you? How is your day? Or is that like an actual prescribed program?
So it's funny if you look up. I believe Manager Tools follows this as part of their premise too. They call them one-on-ones. I think that's actually we called them in the Army too. But um, meeting weekly with your direct reports and giving them 30 minutes of your time, and it's you don't move, so you can move it in the event of an emergency, but that's not your time to move. It's a set scheduled time that they have to meet with you every single week for 30 minutes. They don't have to meet for the full 30 if they don't want to. It's their time, not yours. And in that discussion point, it's not where you sit down and you go over all the stuff you expected them to do. It's their time to talk to you for 30 minutes about whatever they feel like they want to talk about. Most of the time, it will transition from pleasantries into work stuff automatically. And as a leader for the last like 5 minutes, you can pretty much, if anything was missed that you wanted to bring up, you can kind of guide it that way. Now, over time, as you do these for years and years, depending on how long your employees are with you, it'll transition more into a 30-minute session where it floats back and forth. But in the beginning, really just giving them time to speak about whatever they want to. It helps you learn who your employees are, what their likes and dislikes are, where their interests are, what they want to do, and it helps also align goals. In the military, we always had to have 3 short-term goals, 3 long-term goals as part of all of these like counseling statements and stuff. And a lot of times they would a sergeant would ask you like, let's focus on your PT score, your physical training score. Let's focus on your marksmanship. I didn't do that as a sergeant. I didn't care what your short or long-term goals were, as long as you had something, because humans with goals work towards things better, and you can align work to those goals. It doesn't matter what it is. If you have a brand new employee who wants to just buy a brand new Camaro, that's what they want to do. You can use work projects and work goals to align to their goal of getting a new Camaro. And by having 30 minutes a week where they can talk to you, you can help with that goal alignment over the week. You can make sure they have time to communicate with you. And you'll also find that the ad hoc stop by your desk to tell you something. If it's not important, they know they got 30 minutes to tell it to you during the week. So they don't have a reason to come interrupt you. They can just wait till that one. I can just wait for my one-on-one session. That's when I'll bring this up. Mm-hmm. And you'll find that like just overall it's better. So that is actually what it is. The more direct reports, a leader shouldn't have more than 5 to 7 direct reports. If you're sitting on 12 to 17, you're going to have a problem with 30-minute one-on-ones, but you also really can't manage 12 to 17. So you got a problem to start with. So work with that one first.
Yeah. It's hard to get to that level of leadership with 15, 17 people.
Yes.
All right. So we got our final section. We call it myth or true. So I'm going to give you just a couple of questions and you say whether you think, Tom, whether you think these are myth or true and why. All right. So the first one, priority guess, position determines leadership.
Absolutely true. No, that is
that was a softball. False. That's just a softball to get you started.
No, that is a myth. You have leaders in your organization that are not in leadership positions, and people go to them to ask questions all the time.
All right, next one. Leaders are born.
So I will, true, but not all of them. So there are people who are natural leaders. Now, whether they decide to be leaders or not, I just mentioned in the previous question, you have people that are leaders in your company that are not in leadership positions. So there are leaders there. They're leading things that you don't know about. People go to them for all kinds of things. They were born that way. They just see a problem and they solve it. You could promote them. You could make them real leaders in your company, but otherwise they'll shadow lead everything.
All right, next one. You must show a clear plan in times of uncertainty. It's a hard one.
Myth. Truth.
Myth.
So, okay, you have to have a plan. You don't have to have a clear plan.
Oh, okay. Expand. I like this. Expand.
In times of uncertainty, everyone is in a slight state of chaos and panic. And with no clear direction, that will overwhelm everything. So no matter what it is, you have to come up with some plan to move forward. some plan to get out of whatever that uncertainty is, whatever that tar pit is. Even if you don't even think you can get out of it, you have to have a plan. It doesn't have to be a clear plan, but anything will guide you in the right direction, will unite your team, and in theory, it'll build on itself and move out.
So just some sense of direction, and it's okay to not have all of the details worked out.
You're never going to have no plan. What is this? Let me think.
No plan survives contact with the enemy.
There you go.
Yeah.
No plan survives contact. So, and I will say this: no project plan survives implementation. So it's the same thing, right? So it doesn't matter how much detail you had planned. It's going to go off the rails. You just have to stick to some overarching plan.
Got it. Okay. Leaders must be the most knowledgeable.
False. Hard false.
Hard false.
Yes. It's a common misconception that the leaders have to have all the answers. Leaders don't have to have a single answer. They just have to be able to unite people that do have the answers.
Good.
Must take a lot of emotional intelligence to be able to pull that off.
I think you're right, Elizabeth. It does. Because in school, we're taught we always have to have the answer, right? Smartest kid in class has to have the answer. And it's like in leadership, no, I have to rally the right people, but it doesn't have to be me. All right, last question, and then actually I have a bonus question because I said we'd talk about it and I didn't. But okay, last one. You lead by example or you don't lead at all?
Well, I think that's the truth because as I mentioned earlier, I feel that if you're not leading by example, then you're not leading. You're leading through some myth. You're trying to lead and it's not going to work.
Okay. All right. Final question. This is no longer true or myth. It's just a final question because earlier in the intro, I said that we were going to talk about the difference between leadership and management. And so I found a really interesting post from you on social media. I think you took it out of a military textbook, and it said, you lead people and you manage things. Can you expand on that to maybe help us understand the difference between leadership and management?
Yeah. So like, as a good capstone on everything I've said so far, you don't tell everybody what to do. That's how you manage an item. That's what I do with my computer. I get on there and I tell it what I want to do for the day, and I give it all its tasks, and I lay everything out. But leadership's not that. You're not coming in with a task list and handing it off to every single person in your charge. That's not what leadership is. Leadership is coming in and making sure that they have the tools and you have cleared the path for them to do what they need to do to accomplish the task. That's what leadership is. Leadership is about making sure your people can do their jobs. You have cleared the path for them to do it. You are communicating for them, and you are making sure they have the right information to make the right decisions.
Awesome. Tom, thank you. This has been an episode of Magnify the Middle with Elizabeth and Tom Watson. Thank you for coming on today, Tom.
Thanks, Tom.